I'm Genevieve Randall from Nebraska Public Media. So pleased to support Lincoln's Symphony Orchestra in these pre-concert chats. Some of LSO's concerts, by the way, can be heard on our occasional series, Nebraska Concerts. That is broadcast following Friday Live each week at 11 a.m. Central on our statewide network, and it's hosted by Laura Black. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. For this chat, I am joined by, as you can see, our maestro and music director, Ed Polachek. Nice to see you, Ed.
Always great to be here with you.
And we have a special guest this time as well. That is composer, violist, teacher extraordinaire, Kenji Bunch. Kenji, so nice to meet you.
So great to meet you. Thanks so much for having me.
And Kenji is here because one of his pieces is on this program, a concert called Powerful Perseverance. And depending on when you're watching this pre-concert chat, that is either coming up or in a few minutes, Friday, April 10th, 7:30 p.m. at the Lead Center for Performing Arts. And that Kenji Bunch work is called Super Maximum, which is a fabulous title. So we'll talk about that. Super Maximum. Now, Kenji, I know because as we talked about before actually getting on the chat, I've listened to a lot of your music. So you have delved into multiple genres, bluegrass, classical, all kinds of things. There's a wonderful chamber work called String Circle that explores all kinds of American styles of music. What have you done with Super Maximum?
Well, Super Maximum was inspired by this pretty amazing art form that was created in the worst of situations. It was prisons during the Jim Crow era in the South, where the inmate population, many of whom it turns out were wrongfully accused and just kind of rounded up for work. You know, these were work camps. Um, they were put into chain gangs in the fields, and the tradition of chain gang song. I first came across this. Many of us saw the movie "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," and that as a bluegrass guy, that was a big deal when it came out in the '90s. And I got the soundtrack, and the first track on that soundtrack was a field recording of a chain gang, an actual chain gang from Angela State Prison in Louisiana, and it just like blew me away, and it gave me chills listening to this. You know, these were real people suffering in these conditions, singing these songs, and so I just became fascinated. Like, where is this coming from? Like, how is there a recording of this? And you know, when you go down that rabbit hole, you learn a lot about the Alan Lomax and his work in field recordings, and all this is archived in the Smithsonian. So I listened to some of that, and what really struck me was, as I said, this is an art form that was created in this terrible circumstance, and it was done so as a means of survival. These people realized that the slowest worker was getting beaten, was getting whipped, and so if they all sang a rhythmic work song, they'd be working at the same pace, and so there would be no slowest person. You know, it would slow down the faster folks, and isn't that kind of amazing that so it was really done for survival, and but the music is like beautiful in its own way, and just the fact of responding to the situation with art is I think incredible. So that was the inspiration for Super Maximum. I wanted to use that source in a respectful way that honored it, and it kind of imagines a world in which that music is able to transcend these people from that situation. So that's basically what the piece is.
Yeah, I want to come back to the whole respectful part in just a moment here. But Ed, for you, how much background did you have on this particular piece before working on it with the orchestra? And how much of that background do you actually hear in the music itself?
Oh, well, I have a confession to make that when I saw the title Super Maximum, my mind did not go back to the idea of super maximum prison. I thought of a composer because I've been doing some of Kenji's music and really falling in love with the various aspects of it and the uniqueness of it. That I thought, oh, well, this is going to be some kind of super maximum Kenji bunch that I'm looking at. And of course, when I finally got to listen to it and read about it and then found the score of it, it absolutely it blew my mind. Actually, it's a phenomenal work I see, and very ingenious in the way that Kenji was able to do this layering, setting up right from the beginning with various slapping of the strings against the fingerboards and the stomping of feet on the floor, along with brass blowing, just hissing through their without pitch through their instruments. With an incredible tautness of the rhythmic aspect of what was going on. And this layering, every time there's a new layer that is introduced, and then on top of what was going on, gets almost not just mesmerizing and hypnotic, but almost overwhelming. And then in his inimitable genius, he brings it back and begins to start all over again with other aspects on top of the old aspects and go. Now, if I wanted to give an example of just this kind of layering, if people think of something like Ravel's Bolero, you just have this kind of almost a variation set of, I don't know how, 22 measures worth of that melody with different instruments and this big crescendo to the end. And in some ways you can follow that because you're going to constantly be aware of the kinds of layerings and that where the ear picks up the melodic aspect of it as well as the rhythmic aspect of it. And I think this happens to be a side by side, and I should have said this first, that this performance will be one of the aspects that we do with Lincoln Symphony Orchestra every year with the Lincoln Youth Symphony, which is directed by our former viola principal, Clark Potter, who is also genius in the way he's able to work this. And when I had my first rehearsal with the Youth Symphony, I asked them, they hadn't had many rehearsals on it, and I said, do you have any idea what you feel might be the most challenging part of this piece? And what it got distilled down to was basically not just the rhythm, but the rhythm in relationship to the tempo, because it cannot get faster. It has to stay at that 76 to the quarter note. And that's a critical aspect. And I said, so we came to an agreement on that, of what it should be. But then with the trickiness, and I said, the other thing that you're going to have to really pay attention to, and I know that this has been an eye opener even for our professionals, is the kind of articulation that is put in there, because it has to be, in a certain sense, unbelievably precise, with the feeling that it's being impromptu, that it's being improvised as it goes along, which it would have been as a song in the singing, in the way I believe the gospel or the church music would have been infused in these African American workers or prisoners. So I have kind of flipped over this, and that's also when the previous season when I programmed this, that I started doing more research on Kenji Bunch's music, and then I just became totally enthralled. I mentioned this before we went on air, of this piece called "Aspects of an Elephant," and I went Google Gaga over it. There's Now I understand, Kenji, by the way, why there have been so many concerts of just Kenji Bunch's music. It is so kaleidoscopic and so different and so many
Yeah.
multifaceted and so accessible. It's really genius, and I congratulate you on it. I think you've done a magnificent job. So
Oh my goodness.
that's where I'm coming.
I absolutely second that motion, Kenji, for sure.
Oh,
I mean, I want to ask you a question about combining genres and bringing in multiple generations here too. But I want to get back to that whole thing about being respectful because there's some other pieces that you've written, whether it was about the aftermath of 9/11, when you're approaching something really sensitive or sad, or in this case, a difficult subject in history. You've done some work on the Japanese and the history of the Japanese in America. How do you approach subject matter like that? And as you're working on the piece, how do you know you've done it? You've completed this piece and you've done honor to the subject that you're talking about in the music.
that's a great question. And yeah, one thing that fascinates me and keeps me working is the notion of telling stories for people who weren't able to tell them themselves, or just trying to keep some aspects of history alive and in our minds. And I feel like I have a unique position to be able to do that. And I I would say what I didn't realize that I was sort of compelled to seek out these projects, and I never really thought much about what I was doing until kind of recently. I would say in the last decade for sure. And what I've come to realize about what keeps me working like this is I. This sounds like a very trite thing to say, but I went into writing music, it turns out, to make my parents happy. Um, and what that really means is they were both deeply wounded people. My dad grew up in the Depression. He is kind of an older dad for me, and he grew up in uh, deep poverty and chaos, and never healed from that his whole life. He was not someone who would seek out therapy. He was not from that generation that would turn to that resource. At that time, my mom was of the generation in Japan known as the generation of the ashes. So she grew up in the ashes of World War II. She was there until the early 1960s when she came here and met my dad. So they had a lot of trauma that was never dealt with, I don't think. Before my brother and I were born, they lost a child to cancer. Our sister was 2 years old. So there are all these like really deep wounds, and classical music seemed to make them both. It brought joy to the house. They weren't musicians themselves, but they were very invested in my brother and me learning how to play an instrument, and then I kind of took it and ran with it, and that made them happy, and then I started writing music, and Most parents would be like, "Shouldn't you get a real job?" And they're like, "No, this is great." Um, and what I realized I started doing in my music, or maybe I've always done it, is looking for uh, uh, trying to create something healing in some way, whether it's addressing difficult topics and trying to heal societal or historical wounds, or just through entertainment and fun and joy, which I think is underrated sometimes as a way to heal.
True.
Humor, all right. So that's kind of why I do what I do, I guess. Does that answer your
Yeah. Oh,
question?
absolutely. No, that does answer my question. We only have a little bit of time left. I will tell those who are either listening or watching here that we will be talking with the guest soloist on this concert, Tony Siki Yoon. That's coming up in the second past half of our pre-concert chat here. But I did want to address the whole multi-generational thing because I noticed in your bio, Kenji, it does say something about crossing those genres, but also crossing generations and trying to make music accessible to all kinds of people, regardless of genre or age. So briefly, how do you do that?
Well, it I think it's a little different for every project, but generally I try to always keep in mind the experience of the listener, and I'll I try to zoom out of whatever piece I'm working on and imagine being in the audience as this is happening. Like, is this gonna work? And then I'll think, would my dad like this? As a non musician, would my kids like it? um, how would they receive it? And not that uh, I try to please everyone. I mean, maybe I'm a people pleaser. Maybe that's a problem. But I don't. It's not that I'm trying to pander to an audience. I I I like to tell stories, and I like to communicate something, and I want to uh, figure out how best to communicate this story or these ideas, and I want to keep that perspective in mind. Like, is this actually connecting with the listener in the way that I want it to?
Oh, that's
You,
beautiful. That's a great way to put it. Well, I definitely want to make sure that we save time to talk to our guest pianist, and Ed and I will also talk a little bit about the other pieces on this program. We've got the Shostakovich Piano Concerto Number 2, which Tony will be playing, and of course the Johannes Brahms Symphony Number 3. But Kenji Bunch, your Super Maximum starts this concert in that side by side with Lincoln Youth Symphony led by Clark Potter. And I just want to thank you for joining us here. And I guess it's raining where you are. Am I hearing rain in the
Oh
background?
yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
kind of beautiful. It's very soothing during our pre-concert chat. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Thank you, Maestro. This is a real honor. I really look forward to being in attendance.
we're thrilled that you're going to be there. We really are. It's very special to have the composer join us whenever we do a piece of his or hers, because that adds such an extra quality to what people are doing, because they realize that, oh my God, the actual living composer. Brahms didn't come, but got a bunch.
Uh, well, as the composer, it's very special for me, and it's just something I really uh, appreciate. So thank you.
Looking forward.
Well, it is time for the second half of our pre-concert chat here. I don't know if half is appropriate, but the second part of our chat where we welcome our guest solo pianist here, Tony Siki Yoon. Tony, it is so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I can't wait to be with all of you in just a few days.
I believe it. So I was reading up on you, and one thing that there's a couple things actually that really struck me. One was that you talk about in other interviews an importance that you place on being with others. You've played solo recitals, all kinds of things, but having the audience there, you said the piece is just as important as the audience is in the room. Can you explain why you feel that way?
Yes, I think for me, what's really important is that I breathe with my audience. It's the same as playing with an orchestra. I breathe with the conductor, I breathe with the orchestra, I breathe with the second violin who's sitting far away from me. It has to be one. And so, of course, very naturally, when I play with an orchestra, it it's very important that it feels like chamber music. You know, it doesn't feel like I'm playing with 100 people, but it has to feel like a small group. And in a recital setting, it's a little bit different. But what I mean is that I kind of constantly scan for signals in the audience, and it gives me feedback so that I know what to do next. And it makes the concert very enjoyable for me, and I think it's also enjoyable for the audience because they feel involved in a way. And I know it sounds very psychological, but this is what I feel on stage, and it's a great feeling when that unity happens.
Oh, well, we're all in for a treat for sure, I would say, with that attitude. You're playing this Dmitri Shostakovich Piano Concerto number 2. And the other thing I notice about you that really stands out is that when you have talked about specific pieces you've played, you've either got a very solid picture in mind, a storyline, or an emotion that you want to bring out. What is it that you're thinking about as you play the Shostakovich?
Well, I don't want to spoil too much, but um, what's really special about this concerto is its honesty. I think is one of the few pieces where Shostakovich seems to put aside that irony or this coded meaning that we associate with him. I mean, he for his entire life basically he negotiated between um, his own artistic truth and survival, basically, or political consequences. So when you write something so direct and so human, it's rare and it's so touching. And the fact that he wrote it for his son also in a weird way changes how I hear the piece a little bit. The outer movements, the first and the third movement, they don't really feel like display, but it almost feels encouraging. It feels generous, and especially the second movement, it's so disarming, right? I mean, it's I think it's one of the most touching things to ever happen in music, and it's not simple because it lacks depth, but because it doesn't need to hide anything, and I think that's just so special.
Wow. Well, Ed, you get to conduct the orchestra with this piece, and I'm sure, depending on when people are watching our chat here, how many times people are curious, how many times do you get to work with Tony and the orchestra together before the performance?
Well, Tony comes in on Wednesday, I believe. Isn't that right? You fly into Lincoln on
I think so, yes. I
Wednesday.
kind of lost track of days now. It's
Yeah, of course. Because, I mean, right now you're in China, right?
at the moment, yes, I'm in Beijing actually.
That's incredible. So,
Totally incredible.
we will talk a little bit about it, and then we'll have a rehearsal on Wednesday evening, and then on Thursday evening, and performance on Friday. And I love it when we get these tubes. You know, there are occasions when an artist comes in, a featured artist comes in, and we only get the one performance, and that's it. But I always feel, and it was exactly what Tony was talking about. I always feel that the more times we can spend together, even if it's the first rehearsal and we're all still trying to figure out what's going on, who am I listening to, how do what's Ed going to do here, how is he going to conduct this, how fast is the soloist going to take it. Um, the more we are together, the greater that glue of the chamber music aspect is, and then the interplay not only between the soloist and the orchestra, but within the orchestra. Oh, I'm second flute, but I have to be listening to the second bassoon here, or whatever it is that's going on becomes greater and greater. So two rehearsals we'll have a lot of fun with this, and it's an unusual piece in that it's one of the cheeriest, you might say, of all Shostakovich's works. He had as Tony had mentioned, a darker side to him, and I think it was because of the political situation that he was in. He had to watch, what he was doing. And there are so many of the Shostakovich works that can be almost painfully sad or distressing. But this one is, even with the second movement in the minor key, it's not so much sad as it is melancholic. And I always got the feeling that because Dmitri Shostakovich wrote this for his son Maxim, that he was thinking of the days when Maxim was just a newborn and just a toddler and just a youngster and going through those years, because it does open up into this beautiful thing. But the two outer movements, oh my God, they are just so much fun. I'm really looking forward to this.
I love it. And Tony, you're getting excited. I love the smile on your face. I think I want to talk just a little bit, since we have a few minutes. I mean, we could talk about Brahms Symphony, but we have Tony here, so I think we'll focus on
Nope.
on you, Tony, if that's okay. So for listeners or viewers, I suppose, since we're on Zoom, you had this quick trajectory in your career, and you've moved around a lot. You were born in Canada, you moved to Beijing, then you went to school in the US. You graduated from Juilliard in 2024. So let's let people do the math there. That's only 2 years ago. Do you have an album out yet?
No, actually, I think I've gotten like 4 degrees from Juilliard or something, because I went to pre-college and then I did bachelor's, and then now I'm actually still at Juilliard because I'm doing artistic diploma, and so I'm just getting all the degrees.
Oh my gosh.
He's working with one of my favorite people in the whole world, Veda Kaplinsky, who's on the faculty at Juilliard. She was on the faculty at Peabody when I was there as well, and I fell in love with her. And I just asked to send her my love. Big hug and kiss from Ed Polachek.
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of really amazing teachers and a mentor that you met at a competition that you won in China, which is the conductor Yannick Nézet again. How in the world?
I know. I don't know either. I mean, it so feels unbelievable to me. I mean, so it was the competition in Beijing, and the final round was with Yannick and the Philadelphia Orchestra, and then after that, he became a mentor, and then we worked on like a lot of the concerti and solo rep. We worked on Beethoven sonatas and all of them, Brahms, and I think I'm just too spoiled. That's all I can say, and it's been so great. And then I made my Carnegie Hall debut with him, and yeah.
That's fabulous. Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, to say I'm grateful is such an understatement. So.
Well, we're getting to see you on this fast trajectory here, I think, at the beginning of what's going to be a fantastic career. At the very, very beginning of your musical influences, you did not come from a musical family, but your sister was taking violin lessons, and I heard there was a little bit of rivalry over the violin. Is this true?
Yes, for a little bit, I think, before I got the real thing, which is called the piano, obviously. Just kidding. We were like really young. I think my sister is 4 years older than me, and so she started the violin, and then so when she was about 8, I was about 4. I started like fighting over the violin, and then my parents eventually got me a piano, and I think that's how I slowly kind of started playing it. But then, like, again, I'm the only musician in my family, so it's nobody thought I would be a professional musician. that this kind of just happened.
Yeah. Do you remember the very first piece you ever played in a recital?
That's such an interesting question. I actually never thought about it. Um, I don't actually.
I
I have
did
to think
read
about it.
you were already playing Chopin at age 9, so I was curious, like, what the very first performance would be. But
It probably was something by Mozart or Haydn or those like simple sonatas, probably just
yeah,
or some Bach. I don't know, but
Bach,
that would be interesting to yeah
Bach
amazing.
conventions, or yeah, yeah.
yeah probably some of those.
I think what's an interesting way to wrap up is if there are some younger viewers of this concert and of our pre-concert chat here, especially, who are considering, a career in music, but there's a lot of nervousness around performance, nervousness around the way that you take that path, whether it's this whole competition path or whether you kind of go your own route. Simona Dinnerstein did not do the competition path famously. What's your advice to young musicians?
I think what's really important is to love music. I think that's the number one thing. And you have to really love it, and not just love listening to it, but you have to love practicing, you have to love putting in the work. I think that's the basics. And just trusting the process, I guess, because everyone has their own road, right? And so just trusting yourself, trusting the process, and loving music, I think that's how I got through a lot of the difficult times.
I love this.
Following your passion. And
Yes.
your words are beautiful, Tony, and particularly, and this is what I love about this concert, in addition to so many other things, but that this is it opens with a side by side with our youth symphony in Lincoln, and there are numbers of those. And I always ask every year that I work with the youth symphony, how many here might be thinking about a career in music, and a few hands go up, and so many of them study with our professionals in the Lincoln Symphony. So it's the connections are really beautiful. And it's all about finding that passion and then feeding it, nurturing it, and following the path.
Absolutely beautiful. Well, I know we all can't wait to hear you, and we can't wait for your first album to come out, Tony.
It should happen soon. Let's see.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Tony Sikiyun, he is the guest piano soloist on this concert with Lincoln Symphony Orchestra, led by our maestro, of course, Edward Polachek. And they are together playing the Shostakovich Piano Concerto Number 2. The concert will start with that side-by-side that Ed just mentioned, Super Maximum by Kenji Bunch with the Lincoln Youth Symphony. And the program closes with the fantastic Johannes Brahms, deeply emotional Symphony Number 3, which we didn't talk about, but that's fine. It will be great just on its own. So hope you enjoy. If you're watching this ahead of time, the concert is Friday, April 10th, 7:30 p.m. at the Leeds Center for Performing Arts. Big thank you to Ed and to Tony, of course. So nice to meet you. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Can't wait to see you in person. This is great.
Can't wait. See you in like 2 days.
Got it.